And we're back with a Fox News alert. President Trump just announcing on Truth Social that prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced by 30 to 80% almost immediately. This appears to be the major announcement that the president has been teasing for days. He plans to sign an executive order tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So that's news ahead of all the other news that we've already been talking about for tomorrow. Monday is going to be a busy day. The president's saying on Truth, Molly, I will be instituting a most favored nation policy whereby the United States will pay the same price as the nation that pays the lowest price anywhere in the world.
It feels like Trump is trying to save face because he had this tariff war, and he realized that this tariff war that he's trying to wage, especially with companies like China, is really going to blow up in his face, especially since we have a huge block of people that are Trump voters who are on these same medications. And if their cost of their medication skyrockets because of the tariffs, then they're going to blame him because it all happens under him. And I have made a prediction that between October of this year and January of next year, about 30% of Trump voters are going to hate Donald Trump's guts because of the damage that he's doing to his base.
Yeah, I think the key word that he had in his statement was almost immediately, right?
Almost immediately.
Just like end the war with Ukraine in 24 hours, right? There's always these little hints that it might not happen. Because almost immediately might be 20 years from now. It's very interesting. So
plausible deniability, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And he always has these subtle little like caveats in his announcements. So, for instance, he back to National Endowment for Democracy. It didn't make any sense that somebody that's trying to that they would defund that and shut it down, and because it's a core part of U.S. imperialism, and it turned out it really wasn't, right? And all these things are kind of like, so the announcement of when it is, so you get the big story that they're going to cut drug prices. By the time they aren't cut, no one will know the difference because you will have thought you've heard this announcement. Reality, you won't know, and you might go, well, maybe my drug was the one that wasn't cut, right? But you won't know that really, in the end, all the drugs were not cut. It's a very, very fascinating.
So, as far as Donald Trump's concerned, he recently put out a post on Truth Social, and which is basically his platform. And I want to read that really quick, just so that we get just the basis of what he's talking about, and then we can start to discuss it a little bit more, and then we can show the news report on it as well. So here, Donald Trump says, for many years, the world has wondered why prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals in the United States of America were so much higher in price than they were in any other nation, sometimes being 5 to 10 times more expensive than the same drug manufactured in the exact same laboratory or plant by the same company. It was always difficult to explain and very embarrassing because, in fact, there was no correct or rightful answer. The pharmaceutical drug companies would say for years that it was research and development costs, and that all of these costs were and would be for no reason whatsoever borne by the suckers of America alone. Campaign contributions can do wonders, but not with me and not with the Republican Party. He continues and says, we are going to do the right thing, something that the Democrats have fought for many years. Therefore, I am pleased to announce that tomorrow morning, the White House at 9 a.m., which was yesterday, I will be signing one of the most consequential executive orders in our country's history. Prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 30 to 80%. They will rise throughout the world in order to equalize and, for the first time in many years, bring fairness to America. I will be instituting a most favored nations policy whereby the United States will pay the same price as the nation that pays the lowest price anywhere in the world. He finishes, says, our country will finally be treated fairly, and our citizens' healthcare costs will be reduced by numbers never even thought of before. Additionally, on top of everything else, the United States will save trillions of dollars. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. So he did that yesterday at 12:22 a.m. Just to get your initial thoughts about this particular post from Donald Trump.
Well, you know what he's not saying, and maybe this is actually part of it that he could have or should have said, is that a huge percentage of our drugs come from China. So the tariffs, this tariff relief for whatever it is, 90 days or something, could theoretically bring down the price of drugs imported from China. But is that all real? Because we keep seeing that looks like, for instance, he did this, pause in tariffs with China. He looked like he might have telegraphed that to his friends, and then everybody bought stocks. They went through the roof as a direct result, even though the economy is basically, limping along, not collapsing. So I think, I wonder if it will stick, or is he just going to be something that he's saying, and then we'll find out, like the AID, that it was just not really done. It was just words. It is interesting too. Bernie Sanders was talking about that for years. It was obviously very popular. For his base, it would be hugely popular. He's smart politically in a lot of ways. He is having a lot of pushback from MAGA on a bunch of issues, like the fact that we're supposed to be at peace, and that's why many people voted for him. That he would save the economy. People voted for him for that, and are upset at the tariffs and problems in the economy as a result of his decisions. And of course, also, the Stargate announcement. People were like, no, why don't we have that money come to us rather than build AI surveillance farms all over America? So he will really pull through with that. I don't know if he even has the power. I don't know if he can do an executive order to reduce prices, and I'm sure the drug companies are not going to be too happy about it. And it's a possibility that what would end up happening is maybe the generic drugs will even be cheaper than they are currently, but the ones with patents still will be at whatever price the market rate. Sort of, it could be like the affordable housing scam, just a affordable drug scam now. Hard really to say what's going to go on. And I don't know if I have friends that really like Trump, and they say that he does all this chaos and craziness because he's got like some other 5-dimensional chess plan that he's got going. So that's how he hangs on to a lot of his supporters, this belief that there is some real strategy, but it could be just chaos and random statements, at the time, just to build his base, or keep his base, save his base from leaving him while everything else is going crazy.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say.
Kind of like when they treat him like he's their god, and it's like the Lord works in mysterious ways.
It's exactly like that. I mean, I have really smart friends that are QAnon people still. I'm like, wow, that is intense, man. And then I also have friends that are really close to RFK Jr. of all things, But of course, I have a lot of friends that were Black Panthers, So I was friends with Carol Hill and Kilu Nyasha. I have a lot, they're a lot closer to those people. But anyway, it's fascinating because the two people surrounding Kennedy now, his deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Peter Thiel guy, and PayPal Mafia person who connected to Palantir, which is the world's largest surveillance and military operation. And so that's like supposed to be health and human services. So you've got like one CIA connected deputy secretary of health and human services. And then his spokesperson is also a Palantir, CIA connected person who have exactly the opposite ideology, allegedly, of what Kennedy is supposed to represent to what MAGA wanted, which is ending, vaccine schedule or things like that, whatever the trip is that they were like hoping he would be for. And so there's tons of infighting now in MAGA over all kinds of issues, so maybe this drug thing, cutting drug prices, is a way to try to give them hope and have them return to the fold. But it could be, maybe it's a real thing. Maybe he's actually is concerned. He's a weird dude. Maybe he's concerned about it and really wants seniors to have affordable drug prices.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
I mean, in that post from Truth Social, the way Trump was speaking, he started to sound like he was going to the left of the Democratic Party. And it was wild. I'm like, wait a minute. This is Donald Trump saying this? He's talking about drug prices and how, every other country in the world has lower drug prices, and we're the ones who are paying these exorbitant amounts in drug prices, and how they need to be lowered for the working people. And it's like, wait a minute, but aren't you for the big businesses? But yeah, at the same time, he's saying this, and I'm like, is he pulling our leg, or is he actually being serious? And sometimes Trump can sometimes be a wild card, but I always trust a snake to be a snake, and I always trust a capitalist to be a capitalist. And Trump, I feel like this is something to like make him, I think it's a political move, but at the same time, sometimes politicians will do the right thing for the wrong reasons. And sometimes, even though it's for the wrong reasons, I'm like, okay, go ahead and do it,
Yep, exactly. But then I think if we start to read these proclamations that he makes on Truth Social and things, he's always got these wiggle room. It's like it's slightly, the big message sounds great, but then you start to look into the details, and like, for instance, maybe he has no power to do executive order to reduce it, right? So he's safe. He can say something that we would all love, but then it not knowing all along that can't be reality because he didn't really have the power to do it. You look at this other, just a small smidgen of the same thing. So, he claims that the Ansar Allah capitulated, to his demands, and so he's going to stop bombing Yemen now, right? And but then Yemen just shot down another Predator drone above their, that was hovering above their country. So he's supposed to be not bombing them, and then they've got like, is he really at a fight with Netanyahu and Israel, or maybe not? There's a lot of evidence that it's a good cop, bad cop thing, right? And for instance, the Brookings Institute, which is a Democrat Party affiliated think tank, they put out white paper, Road to Persia, in 2009, which outlined that the president at some point and the U.S. government would pretend like they were really negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran, and it's going to be really good. But then meanwhile, they're going to keep arming Israel, and they're going to facilitate Israel attacking Iran, because that, is the final neocon, victory is supposed to be taking over Iran. And then the U.S. will go, oh, it's terrible what happened to Israel. We're all going to have to defend them and join in the war against Iran, which would be completely insane. If you, particularly if you don't want your economy to crash, that's insanity. But it could be, because then Project 2025 by the Heritage Foundation, which is supposed to be a Republican-associated think tank, the people that gave us Obamacare, for example, or welfare to work under Clinton, they're They're bipartisan, even if the Democrats try to pretend like they're not, that Heritage is only a right-wing organization. And they are outlining exactly the same thing, that the Trump administration would pretend like they're doing a deal with Iran, and then there'd be some kind of false flag or some incident that would bring Israel and Iran into armed conflict, and the U.S. would be reluctantly dragged into defending Israel. And that they actually outline there's going to be a phony fight between the U.S. and Israel, and then in the end it'll be revealed. So is he going to follow the think tank's advice exactly? Is he going to buck these think tanks, or because he's surrounded with these basically and this friend of mine that's connected that's friends with RFK Jr. There's like noting that there's a lot of CIA in the Trump administration. You basically with J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and then sometimes they try to say Eric Schmidt was like a Democrat, but he's connected. Look at the top aide to the mayor of San Francisco, Sam Altman, was at the first press conference of Trump's announcing this whole Stargate AI farms and making it so that they could have AI, even according to both Sam Altman and Larry Ellison, who was also at the press conference, that they could actually have the AI analyze the cell makeup of individuals. They could create their own individual vaccine for every person, and they would know about every person. Larry Ellison, who's the head of the CIA defense contractor Oracle, which has control of TikTok, for example. He was saying in September before the election that everyone will be in their best behavior because we will know everything about everyone at all times. And he described in quite detail, that it will go to a central location, the AI will figure out what crime you're doing, and then the police will be sent directly to you to pull you in. And that the police will even have to be in their best behavior because everything they do would be going to to these AI farms to be analyzed, and then appropriate people in the local government will come out and capture you or whatever it is that they're supposed to do. So this digital dystopian thing that the Trump administration is putting forth was actually core to many of the objections of the MAGA people, and now they're getting it full on. So you look at all these Palantir and people surrounding the Trump administration, and the bragging of Alex Karp, who's the CEO of Palantir, who's like really a nut. They've been worried that the Palestinian movement will be the end to freedom in the world, and they'll never ever get people to go out and fight their wars anymore. At the same time, they're saying, both Peter Thiel and Alex Karp were saying that they're the most powerful company in the world, and then they can, and they're getting contracts. I think they're getting the contracts for like Social Security. They're definitely, that's why I think in the Health and Human Services, you got Palantir people at the very center because, they've already swiped all the data, right? Digitized it. And then they're going to be selling us solutions, that might not be solutions, they'll just be profit. So when you have Palantir, when you have the CIA overtly running the White House without even trying to pretend like there's not, who knows what's going to go on? It's pretty frightening.
True. I wanted to share this as well. This is actually a segment from Fox News, and they asked a couple questions that I'm actually quite interested in hearing about. So let's get into this, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
And we're back with a Fox News alert. President Trump just announcing on Truth Social that prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced by 30 to 80% almost immediately. This appears to be the major announcement that the president has been teasing for days. He plans to sign an executive order tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So that's news ahead of all the other news that we've already been talking about for tomorrow. Monday's going to be a busy day. The president's saying on Truth, Molly, I will be instituting a most favored nation policy whereby the United States will pay the same price as the nation that pays the lowest price anywhere in the world. It's an interesting move for the White House.
It is. And that is kind of about trade. At the same time, he's also been talking about expanding the ability to make drugs here, making that easier for companies to be able to do that, and companies to build, and drug companies to build, and factories to build, and to bring some of that home as well. And then also, not to forget, we're expecting some sort of announcement related to China. I don't know if that all gets woven into this or not, Lydia, but your thoughts?
I was thinking the same thing, because a lot of our active ingredients for our pharmaceutical drugs come from places like China and from India as well. So I was wondering, I had the same thought. I wonder if some of this China deal is also addressing where our pharmaceutical ingredients are coming from and having to do something to do with, reshoring or giving us better access or more transparent access to those critically needed ingredients. I also have another thought too, is I wonder if he's addressing the pharmacy benefit managers. We've heard a lot about them in the news, but those are kind of like the intermediary players that broker access to drugs between hospitals and pharmacies from the drug makers. There have been a lot of questions about their role and how pricing is set for access for Americans. Maybe he's addressing that. That's been a big issue as well. So we'll have to wait and see till tomorrow.
So just like you were saying earlier, like a lot of the main components that are in some of these medications are sourced from places like China and India, and so it feels like Trump is trying to save face because he had this tariff war, and he realized that this tariff war that he's trying to wage, especially with companies like China, is really going to blow up in his face, especially since we have a huge block of people that are Trump voters who are on these same medications. And if their cost of their medication skyrockets because of the tariffs, then they're going to blame him because it all happens under him. And I have made a prediction that between October of this year and January of next year, about 30% of Trump voters are going to hate Donald Trump's guts because of the damage that he's doing to his base. And this feels like he's trying to mitigate that damage that he caused, right? But my question is that he's going to have to mitigate that damage, while at the same time, if he's actually serious about this, he's going to have to undercut his billionaire buddies at the same time. And is he really willing to do that, or is he just put it out there in the ether so that people will believe that he's going to do it, when in reality he's not? And so that's one of my biggest questions. Is is he really doing this, or is it just optics? Because I know that the Democratic Party they're like the royalty when it comes to optics. Like, they love optics, but the Republican Party is now starting to do a lot of optics too.
Yeah, I think the key word that he had in his statement was almost immediately, right?
Almost immediately.
Just like end the war with Ukraine in 24 hours, right? There's always these little hints that it might not happen, because almost immediately might be 20 years from now. It's very interesting. So
deniability, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And he always has these subtle little caveats in his announcements. So, for instance, he back to National Endowment for Democracy. It didn't make any sense that somebody that's trying to that they would defund that and shut it down. and because it's a core part of U.S. imperialism, and it turned out it really wasn't, right? And all these things are kind of like, so the announcement of when it is, so you get the big story that they're going to cut drug prices. By the time they aren't cut, no one will know the difference, because you will have thought you've heard this announcement. Reality, you won't know, and you might go, well, maybe my drug was the one that wasn't cut, right? But you won't know, and that really, in the end, all the drugs were not cut. It's a very, very fascinating. But yeah, in this issue with China, I think that it's totally I think you're right. The idea that the tariffs would have made all the prescription drugs potentially go up like double in price or greater, and people already can't afford their drugs, and that is his base, and and so it would really damage him. Now, I think he's going to lose. I think your prediction may be that the MAGA people are going to hate him even sooner than you're predicting, because if you watch like on I've been trying to build there's really, really good people that voted for Trump, and they weren't racist. None of the people I know that supported Trump, they fell for the lies of Trump, and they thought really all these great things were going to happen. And just like the people, there's really good people that voted for Kamala, who thought maybe if she got in, she would maybe do something good. You don't know. But both parties end up ultimately are just deceiving you, and they're essentially have the same masters, the same people funding them. So that's the problem.
Yeah, I because a lot of times liberals will bring this up. They'll say, well, the people who voted for Trump are not racist, but racism is not a red line for them. And that's when I push back and I go, yeah, and a lot of people who voted for Kamala Harris, they're not genocidal, but genocide wasn't a red line for them.
Correct.
It just goes to show that both sides they've been placated, they've been hoodwinked, they've been bamboozled, because they felt like they had to give some concessions in order for them to be able to get a personal win, within domestic policy. When in reality, there was never an intended to be a win for any one of us. It's all for the people at the top. And so, a lot of people are constantly being fooled by both these parties, and really by the system itself, in order to give a thumbs up or have their consent manufactured in order to allow atrocities to continue. Because at least we're eating, right? At least we have cheaper drugs, or at least my rent's not going up as high as it usually would. But in reality, it's still going to happen. It's just they're lying to you and saying that it won't.
Right.
It's really as they say, it's nasty work on the part of both parties. Really.
Well, my grandfather was OSS, Office of Strategic Services. He was Harvard Law, Dartmouth, all the classic things of like George Bush. He basically was parallel with George Bush Senior, George H.W. Bush, and he explained to me, because I think he thought I would be following in his footsteps, so to speak. He explained how they set up. He was involved in Pearl Harbor, and why we needed Pearl Harbor, because American people wouldn't go to war against Japan unless we did that. But another thing that he made really clear was that the only purpose of elections is to divide the population so they are not a threat to the people in power. That's the only reason. So when I heard him argue with Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara over the phone, or with his best friend Curtis LeMay, he was arguing for them to drop the atomic bomb on Hanoi, not to defend democracy. He was very clear with both of them that defend capitalism. And of course, that's why the Nazis at the end of World War II were allies of the United States, because the issue was not, Nazism or they wanted to push back against communism for fear of the good example. Well, that's what the whole, overthrowing, Cuba is about. You don't want people having, what potentially could happen in Cuba, where everybody's housed and everybody's fed and that kind of thing. You've got to paint them as monsters. And so the people in power, at least during the period, he died when I was 14. They were clear that it was not that democracy was a symbol to manipulate the public. The intelligence community, which now we have overtly in control of the White House, they're the ones that determine who's in power, who isn't. And they don't do it by like a magic wand or like the Wizard of Oz or something. They do it by manipulating events. That's why the Epstein thing is so important. Or any of these other like blackmail things that go on. And it's not just sex blackmail, but financial blackmail and so on. Things to keep everybody going along with the that's why you'll see Epstein with Hillary and and Bill and Trump and Melania, and they're all on the same team because they're on the oligarch team, right? And so that and you can see there's even connections between our enemies, where the U.S. billionaires are doing business, like in Russia still, even though it's not supposed to, like that, right? So it's really the it's a divide and conquer strategy, and that's the other thing, having dual. The people in power like to have there be the Republicans and the Democrats, or Coke and Pepsi, or McDonald's and Burger King. So it makes it like good or evil. That having a dualist way of organizing society is a core to the ruling class maintaining power, and that's why they have they have these elections, not because they support democracy. They absolutely are against democracy. That would be a threat to their survival, because there's 99, like in Occupy, there's 99% of us who are getting screwed, and that 1% needs to maintain power, and that's one of the key ways of maintaining power is running phony elections.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. One of the things I want to give attention to is that there was someone who was very skeptical about this move by Trump, and they actually did I don't want to say a tweet thread, but they did a long tweet basically explaining why they think that Trump is full of it. So I want to share this as well, because I want to get this side of the conversation. This is from Brian Berletic. So he says this. He says, "This is one of the most insulting statements so far from the Trump administration to the U.S. public, pretending to stand up to Big Pharma while lying to protect them." He says, 1, the pharmaceutical corporations overcharging for medications are mainly U.S. companies in the first place. I want to stop there, because a lot of times we'll talk about how, a lot of these companies, they get a lot of their main components sourced from places like China or India. But these are still American companies that are screwing over American people. And so to say that, making it sound like these companies are from outside the country, no, these companies are inside the country. And they are really willing to just throw their own people under the bus in order to make a quick buck. And so I found that to be a really strong point there.
Brian is someone everyone should follow. From my background, from having grown up with not only with my grandfather and all the education and intelligence that I received from 14 years of really maybe 12 years since I was a little kid of studying under him, and then my direct experience of being the target of the FBI and CIA and stuff for another 50, 60 years. I found he has got the best analysis of really how the game is played, how it's organized. And so he's one of the people that have been pointing out this Heritage Foundation, Project 2025, and Trump pretending like they're like going to do a deal with Iran, and the Brookings Institute, Pathway to Persia, in 2009. He's been talking about those two publications and their connection to the actual what is happening right now. And so the U.S. pharmaceutical industry are the ones making all this money and gouging everybody, and also withholding, withholding services, the insurance companies. I mean, we're supposed to have Obamacare, and it's still like as frustrating as can be to get health care in America. That was supposed to be like, this panacea. But of course, that was a Heritage Found. That was, when Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts. That's when they brought in mass care at that time, and that turned out not to be so good. My brother died in Massachusetts, and I was trying to deal with his death afterwards, and I found that Romney Care was a huge nightmare because we had to sell what little property he had to pay back his debt from having received mass care. So we were hoping to like sell his van so we could pay for the cremation.
Yeah.
But it turned out I went through all this paperwork and I had to give the van to the state of Massachusetts because he was on mass care. So we had to raise money for the cremation other ways, and that. So yeah, I think that it's. I would agree with Brian that the Trump administration could order the companies in the U.S. to lower drug prices. They could also maybe tell them to get their chemicals from U.S. Companies somehow. But see, that's the whole thing that's fascinating. There was this idea of all these tariffs and that would bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and blah blah blah. But you actually have to build buildings and train workers, and you have to rebuild steel mills and all these things, and that would take decades. Maybe you could do it in 10 years. I guess they're trying to do the Stargate thing in 5 years, but that's no benefit to the American people to have mass AI surveillance. And I just saw like in the bill that they're proposing now, I guess in Congress, that they're trying to ban states from regulating AI. And you saw Jaybefaunt speak at an AI conference in Europe a few months ago, where his main message was there can be no regulation of AI, and I think that will be like a huge problem going forward. Already AI is crazy now, the disruption in your life that's and it doesn't benefit regular people. Never will, It's just going to benefit the military and surveillance, and it's quite frightening. But yeah, people should follow Brian because I think he's got really solid perspective. He's a former military person who saw up close and personal how corrupt the whole thing is. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. So let's continue on because he goes on. He says, number 2, the reason Big Pharma has to sell cheaper elsewhere is because if they don't, other countries like Thailand or India will literally make medicine themselves, even if the U.S. says this is illegal, and then won't pay Big Pharma anything at all. So this is hilarious. It's like, all right, well, if you guys don't want to lower the prices, then I guess we're going to have to make it ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at that.
No.
If you guys really want to sell within, our borders, then you better make it affordable for everybody.
Yeah.
If not, then we got the people right? Thailand got the people. India definitely got the people.
Yeah.
So, they can make a big infrastructure project and then build these things and then have them manufacture it themselves.
Exactly. As long as Clinton doesn't bomb your pharmaceutical factory in Sudan.
Wow. True. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. No, I mean, and I think a lot of the world is starting to see that. Just do your business. Like China doesn't really need to worry about the tariffs with the U.S. There's a whole world for China to do business with, right? Just screw the U.S. I mean, we could really end up just totally screwing ourselves through this, like this whole idea that we're the big bully and therefore, do what we say. And then people go, well, what, we don't need to do it. Work with you. We could just work with ourselves.
Yeah, it's like, who is the U.S. who is Big Pharma to dictate to us like what they pay? Like, it's the United States of America. We're supposed to be the big dogs on the world stage, and yet we can't bring the pharmaceutical companies to heel.
Yeah, I know. Or we can't make the health insurance companies cover everybody, or we can't have universal health care. Like everywhere. I mean, part of the way they get away with some of this stuff is people don't travel as much. But I used to have fibromyalgia, and it was a big problem. And I was in Belfast, and at about like 3 p.m, the people I was hanging with, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to run out of my pain medicine. So I need to, is there any way I could see a doctor in Belfast? He goes, oh, just a second. They call up the doctor. Yeah, come in at 9. I show up at 9. I mean, here it would take me like 6 weeks to see a doctor in Santa Cruz. And, but I go in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the guy goes, oh, we don't have a contract with the U.S., so you're going to have to pay $20. Oh my God, even my copay in Santa Cruz after waiting 6 weeks for an appointment was greater than that. And then he said, okay, and I had a ferry to catch over to Scotland. And they say, oh, here, we'll just call it over to the, this is a controlled substance. And they say, oh yeah, we'll go over to the chemist and they'll have it ready for you in 20 minutes. So I go over there. Oh, we're so sorry, Mr. McHenry, you have to pay $20, which I was paying at that time $138 for the same exact thing in the U.S. And that's been my experience traveling around the world. You can get access to much, like all my dental work I do in Mexico, I would never bother the U.S. because it's half price and much higher quality. They have much more modern equipment in Mexico. So, you get much better service and it's much less expensive. And it saves you all this money, even if you travel to, a few weeks ago, we went to Cancun for Playa del Carmen for dental work, and including the hotel, the $400 round trip airfare for 2 to Cancun, and the dental work, it saved us like thousands of dollars. And we got to hang out on the beach. That was insane. So that's American medical. I mean, I've met people that went to India to have surgery because it was like higher quality and much less costly. But then you can have weird things like there's medicine. This time release morphine I was using during fibromyalgia. I was living in Istanbul, and my friend said, "Oh, you can get anything you want here." Turned out that the U.S. pharmaceutical companies wouldn't allow Turkey to have access to the time release morphine. It turned out, I found that out at an unfortunate period of time where I ran out, and I was like in massive pain for a long time. Boy, thank God I got over fibromyalgia. I did that through a really simple technique for anybody out there that's had fibromyalgia, but it's not cheap in a way. I had a gift. Somebody paid for me to go to this place for a water-only fast, and it's good to have medical supervision during a water-only fast. But within 28 days, I no longer had fibromyalgia, something I had struggled with for 20 years, and I've never had symptoms ever since. Isn't that incredible? And had I, God, I could have saved 20 years. See, in the U.S. medical system, since they know that can work, should have a subsidized. Everybody that has fibromyalgia should be allowed to go to a medically supervised water-only fasting facility and cure their fibromyalgia. But if this woman that gifted, she had thousands of dollars in credit at this place, and otherwise I would have never gone there, and never had, if she hadn't gifted it to me, I would have never been able to afford to do it. So I always feel so horrible for people with fibromyalgia, knowing how that was a nightmarish illness. And I survived it. I was homeless a lot of the time. I had fibromyalgia too, which is, that just only adds to and I got banned from employment in the U.S. by the FBI around the time I got diagnosed. So it was horrible, like 20 years of that. But then here you have an actual way, like some alternative medicine works, and like this worked for me, and it should be something that everybody with fibromyalgia can try to see if it does cure them. But everybody has to have all this money. I think it costs $5,000 for, to do a 30-day water-only fast with doctors and stuff to monitor you. And there could be like it seemed like if you're just going to be drinking water. The other thing was, I was lucky. I ended up, Food Not Bombs got a donation at the time that meant I didn't have to keep going around giving lectures trying to raise money to keep Food Not Bombs stuff going. So I had to have the stars aligned. I got a large donation, a $20,000 donation. At the same time, I got a gifted, so I was able to take the whole month off without freaking out. And that was a blessing. And it transformed my life. And everybody should have that opportunity. I mean, why should it be left to chance that you get cured from some horrible, debilitating illness? It's incredible. So the whole system is, I think that's where some of the problem is. If you don't ever leave the United States and you're frustrated with this health system, but you don't really know how much better it can be in other parts of the world, and how much less expensive it can be. And it's sad. And then I've been homeless 5 times, and when I had fibromyalgia, I would, when I became homeless again, and then I got hassled by the emergency room to pay $25,000 in fees because I was going there so much. And thankfully, I got one of the bill collector. I said, "Look, I'm homeless. If I had $25,000, I'd rent an apartment." And they said, "Well, we're going to just write off your debt." But that one of the biggest reasons, so many people that I share food with and survival gear on the streets are on the streets because of medical crises. And a lot of people that, we look down on people that are on fentanyl, and that's like such a frightening and deadly drug. And I've lost a lot of friends to fentanyl, a lot. But what ends up happening is that you'll get you'll be so many of my friends were injured building Santa Cruz. I have friends that fell off of buildings while trying to install windows. And I had a friend that his back was broken when he was building our highway in town, and so on. And these people all live outside now. And some, like when they got cut off of their pain meds, they started moving into street meds, and they already have become homeless. And I run into that so often. And then trying to get up, kick. Back when we had heroin, we don't have that hardly anymore because of the Afghan war's over. But now it's all fentanyl. And there's another whole thing that's horrible is that really one of the things, my grandfather, I was on Sabby about this actually because of tweet about this. Like one of the things my grandfather did in Burma when he organized the most deadly bombing campaign in world history, which is Operation Meeting House firebombing Tokyo. He was very proud of that. But the other thing he was very proud of is that he exported heroin from Burma into the black community, and he set up a distribution network so that after the end of World War II, they would have the black community busy fighting over each other over heroin, rather than uniting against the fact that the GI Bill was two-tiered. That to get the Dixiecrats to vote for a GI Bill, they had to have it be more advantageous for white people than black people. And they knew, since black and white people are dying together in this brutal war, that they would assume they'd have the same rights when they came back to the United States. And when they would discover that they did not have the same rights, they did not basically have the same access to buying housing, which was the key point of the problem at the beginning of the GI Bill, being two-tiered. We need to flood the black community with heroin, so they all are busy doing that and not busy uniting to have equal, to have the GI Bill be equal for both whites and blacks. So when Gary Webb he wrote the Dark Alliance story about, which included the CIA working with the Crips and the Bloods and really expanding them and creating crack cocaine and doing that. We saw during the crack cocaine crisis in San Francisco, we were serving food at Golden Gate Park. You would see plainclothes cops selling crack at the corner, and then they'd be arresting hippies selling pot, because they needed crack to be in the neighborhood, because they needed crime, because they needed more police money. And so, the largest fentanyl bust in California was from the employee at the San Jose Police Union, and she was shipping fentanyl all over the United States using their return address and their FedEx and UPS account to ship fentanyl all over the country. And yet, it becomes these horrible, people from Mexico are bringing it in, or the Chinese are blah, 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 blah. Well, she was ordering the stuff and having it shipped to the union headquarters, and then she was repackaging it and mailing it to her customers all across America. And so the whole the manipulation by the security state behind the scenes is incredible. So it would not be unlikely that Trump says these things, and the people actually running his administration know full well none of them will ever happen. And and if something positive does happen, it's probably because of a strategy to buy a population off, or not because they actually care about the American people, obviously. So yeah, I would be very skeptical if there's any reality to lowering prescription drug prices, unfortunately.
Definitely. Let's continue on. He says, number 3, even at 30 to 80% cheaper, Big Pharma is still vastly price gouging patients who often need this medication to just live. The Trump administration repeats the big lie that Big Pharma spends a lot on research and development, ignoring the fact that much of it is actually paid by the U.S. government and charity. And this part goes into how a lot of the research and development is done by our public universities, which is paid for through our federal dollars. And so therefore, we're actually literally paying for these medications twice.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We're funding all this research, and and then we're having to pay extra prices on top of it. It's incredible. I mean, we're just being duped.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then we have the 4th, where he goes into, he says, I guess they bet Americans don't know any of this, and this childish explanation will easily dupe them. They're probably right. And this is unfortunate because, honestly, when I look at a lot of people praising this. It's like, well, I mean, it's like somebody had said this earlier in the chat, and I want to make sure I get to this because I think this is a really good point. Jacqueline says this sounds like it could be a bit of a scam where they'll overprice medicine by 2,000% and then bring the price down to only 1,000% overpriced.
I can relate to that because I had a graphic design company and would in Boston, and I would have customers come in to. There's this thing called the coupon book, university coupon book that I published, designed, and that's what we did. We would raise all the prices and then give you like 25% off. So we raise all the prices 50% and then give you 25% off, and then I did that, year after year. That was just a common practice. So it's totally what she's saying is very likely. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And then the last point, he brings this up. He says, if you want to know more about Big Pharma, the real solution, nationalization of pharma, watch this video I did on Thailand's government pharmaceutical organization, GPO. And so he puts a link to his video where he talks about how Thailand was able to basically nationalize their pharmaceutical industry, which I will put in the chat. But Brian Berletic actually talks about this, and this is why I'm such a big proponent of fully nationalizing the healthcare industry. Because the thing is, like, ultimately, like, even if you have a single payer healthcare system, who's to say that the pharmaceuticals, the hospitals, medical device manufacturers, the nursing homes, the physical therapy institutions, who's to say that they still won't price gouge us, but they'll do it through the government instead?
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And so my thing is like, look, we have to get all profits out of healthcare, period. No profits in hospitals, no profits in clinics, no profits in pharmaceuticals, no profits. You should not be able to profit off of making a wheelchair or a power chair. I honestly don't think so. You should not be able to profit off of making an MRI machine.
Right.
You should not have to profit off of making syringes. I'm being real with you. Because the thing is, like, the moment you start to introduce profit into a healthcare system, somebody is going to die because they cannot afford it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it would. Yeah, I mean, like, back to homelessness. Huge percentage of homeless people are there because of our healthcare system. So you want to, Newsom wants to end homelessness in California. One of the things he could do is, so-called nationalize healthcare in California. But it's absolutely it's and the countries that like Thailand that have nationalized important aspects of, because I've heard him talk about that a lot, Brian. And if you didn't want to use all the local services and that were super cheap and everything, you could, go to another country or go to a private doctor. But every single person in Thailand has equal access to, affordable healthcare that they don't have to worry about. So yeah. There are all these solutions, but the problem is the people in power want to keep getting profit, and that to them is more important. And they certainly don't care. They don't care about life. Look at the genocide. They can allow a live stream genocide, and they can't. No one can stop it. That's a message that they're trying to send to the world that we are beyond the pale. We can do anything we want. You can't stop us, so you're going to have to obey. And, it's like basically a global mafia. It's incredible. So, yeah, they could nationalize, pharmaceutical industry. And I just saw, like, there was an interesting news report about this CEO in China got caught doing fraud, so they convicted him of, gave him the death penalty. You know, you don't have that over in the United States. We just keep rewarding people for all this stuff. You know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm not for capital punishment, but at the same time, it's like if you're going to be exploiting people and then ruining people's lives, chickens come home to roost.
yeah,
Well,
exactly. Yeah, I'm not into executing, but look at I find it really interesting, the Luigi story. You know, so whether Luigi did it or who did it or what went on, you know, you can speculate a lot about the reality of that entire, you know, shooting. But the fact that on Ben Shapiro's followers denounced him for being against Luigi, it just shows America is, you know, they might not know what the solution is. They might not realize that it's a lot better in other places like Thailand, but they certainly know it's bad. And both MAGA and you know, blue and red MAGA are totally, you know, want the health system changed, and but corporations are in the way. You know, profits in the way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's it for this segment. I'm telling you right now, you know, and to the audience, what do you think? Do you think that Trump is just blowing smoke, or is he actually serious? I'll come to the conclusion where I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it, because to be honest with you, as somebody that just had a transplant a month ago, I'm looking at the price for the medications I had to pay for, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, right, okay, Donnie, let's see what you got. But
Yeah.
I don't believe him at all. You know, I don't believe him. I don't believe him. I don't believe Biden. As far as I can throw them. So,
No.
you know, it's like, yeah, you're not really going to fight against the system. You're just trying to, if anything, at the very most, he's trying to, you know, release some pressure, you know, so that it doesn't build up so much against him and it blows up in his face.
Yeah, that's what it is. Just a bunch of subtle manipulations of throw out statements that, like recognizing Palestine. You know, that was one of them. Then you start to look into a little bit of that, and then of course his administration said, no, we never really said that. But then that was, you know, he might have to say that to get the Saudi Arabia to go along with whatever scam he's trying to push with Saudi Arabia, right? You know, that was, they say, we won't work with you unless you say you recognize Palestinian, you know, Palestine. But recognizing Palestine is like, what does that mean? Palestinian Authority? Or that, oh yeah, there are Palestinians, but we're going to shuttle them all out of Gaza into the Sinai Desert. Well, I recognize them, but I didn't recognize them having rights. You know, everything is this whole linguistic charade of hoping that you will. But it was all that way through the Biden. You know, look at Biden administration. They gaslit us about the greatest economy ever. And I was just like, oh my God, I just got another Facebook post about how wonderful the economy is while I'm on the phone with the fifth person this morning who has no food. So if the economy is the greatest ever, why am I answering United Health's referrals all day for where to get food? That's insane.
Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.